Hello. So good afternoon, everyone. I again welcome you all. After tea break, I believe now we are more energetic after having tea. So now we have the second session, and the theme for second session is the universality of religion. We have two speakers in this session, Dr. Eka Banerjee and Dr. Janki Santokeji. So our first speaker is respected Eka Banerjee, who is one of the India's leading women business leaders and has, in pursuing her purpose, founded Ekam Resonance. Madam Eka is also a training and passion among the leading corporate mythologists in India. And today, ma'am will talk about the need of religion, the concept and content of Sanatana Dharma, and the evolution of organized religion and the yugas. Ma'am is very much interested in having interaction and question answer. So I really request everyone to listen the talk and have the interactive session with Madam Eka. Now, may I request Eka ma'am, we are eagerly waiting for you, ma'am, for your talk. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Penna. Thank you, Shoolini, for organizing this. Dr. Khosla, I have forever been your fan for the longest time, and I'm just so grateful for your gift of both Shoolini as well as the Yogananda Center for Theology to the world, actually, at large, not even just India. It's been a pleasure listening today to Swami Ishwaranandaji, to Swami Anandaji, and it's just, I'm so glad that we're here. So thank you very much. Today when I talk, I want to talk to us about three things. The first one is, and I look at the world in threes. I look at the world in figuring out why the questions of, and if we can ask the right questions, I feel we'll always get the right answers. So the three questions that I want to address today are why. So why does religion exist in the first place? And why is it so universal? The second one is what makes it forever contextual. And the third one is, therefore, how do we practice it in our daily lives? And when I do this, I want to, when I talk about it, of course, there might be times when I use universal references. There might be times where we use personal references. There might be times where we use social references. But I would sincerely urge the audience today to think about everything that I say at three levels. The first is me. How does it apply to me? How is it relevant to me? What does it do for me? The second level of mine, so my social context, my family, my friends, and those around me, people I know, my tribes. And the third level is of the mankind. So therefore, humanity at large, therefore evolution at large, therefore figuring out the larger scale impact, right? With that, I'll start with the first one. And I know both Swamiji and Dr. Chaudhary have already covered some part of this, but the first one is why religion? And Swamiji spoke about the fact that we spoke about how science and religion are really not two different aspects, and one cannot do without the other. And that's where I want to really pick it up from. So when humanity evolved and when we moved from when we moved from beyond the prey and the predator of me versus you, got organized into some kind of community, some kind of tribes, there also came the need for us to decode the world and the universe, for us to understand how the universe works, for us to understand things that we could sense but not necessarily explain. And we all know that that was the origin of science. So my understanding of this world is as follows. I believe that there was, of course, one large event, the creation of the universe. We can debate whether the universe got created with a big bang or whether there was a slow explosion, etc. And we can find our own explanations around it. But we all agree that the universe got formed. When the universe got formed, only two quantities got generated: energy and matter, right? By the way, the Vedanta talks about it in the context of Sankhya as the Prakriti and the Purusha. So we understand that. The reason I'm drawing parallels is actually to show that there isn't much difference between the two. So there was energy and there was matter. From energy and matter came the first science, so-called science, which was physics. And physics taught us just two things. One, of course, is the laws of energy and matter. How does energy behave? How does matter behave? Which is also, by the way, what Einstein spoke about, right? E is equal to mc square. So physics established for us the laws of energy, the laws of matter, and how the fact that the sum of all energy and matter is constant. And the reason that I bring this in this conversation is because I know that at Shoolini, you're all students of science and very curious seekers of the world and its explanation around us. Right? So that's what physics established, that the sum of all energy and matter is constant. Nothing new ever gets created. Nothing ever gets destroyed. The Bhagavad Gita talks about the same principle. And the fact that energy and matter just interchange with each other. Fine, that still doesn't explain why religion was needed. So bear with me. From physics, we moved to chemistry. Chemistry was the science that explained to you how energy and matter interact with each other. Chemistry, by the way, left us behind again with one primary principle, which was that in every transaction on Earth, energy is either consumed or produced. And that's all that there is to the working of the entire universe. We are willing to accept it in science, but the fact is that the same applies to human interactions, to philosophical interactions, to management interactions, to education interactions. Principle yahi hai, however we choose to apply it. And then chemistry got more complicated. So chemistry then became organic, and we started discovering further forms of energy and further forms of matter. And then there was carbon and various isotopes of carbon. And then there was organic chemistry, where you introduced the whole idea of half-lives. There was fission, there was growth, there was decay, there was various combinations. All of that started happening. And slowly we were moving up the curve on our understanding of science, human behaviors, and making sense of the world around us. From chemistry, we slowly graduated into biology. So what was biology? Biology was making sense of life and living matter. So biology introduced even more complex combinations of energy and matter. And then we started talking about aging, we started about decay, we started about growth, we talked about life and death, etc. We moved from plant, fungus, algae, we moved into the animal world, we started decoding animals and their behaviors, and eventually we decoded the biochemistry of the human existence. So think about it, right? Across all our medical sciences, what are we really measuring? We are basically doing the biochemistry of the human body. So if we are measuring if we are studying your digestive system, we are basically analyzing the throughput, the conversion of protein into amino acids, of starch into glucose. When we are studying fatigue in your body, we are studying the production of lactic acid. It's a very biochemistry conversation. Even when we are studying the human mind or the brain, actually, we don't understand the mind completely in science. But even when we study the human brain, we are basically studying the throughput of electrical energy to your brain, correct? Now, here's where it gets very interesting. We started with that creation of the universe. From there, we dropped down, right? So we understood physics, we understood chemistry, we understood biology, and then there was this whole world that we didn't understand. So everything that we understood became science, and everything that we didn't understand became spirituality, became a realm of consciousness conversation, became a topic of spirituality, of religion. And I'm using the word religion very carefully right now, because there is difference between spirituality and religion. So for now, we'll keep it at spirituality. To the extent that at one end of the human evolution, when we studied the brain, the mind, etc., we understood how the brain works, but we didn't understand how the mind thinks. So that became a spirituality, realm of consciousness, stream of existential conversation. But dip down to the other end, the physics end, right? Physics started with explaining laws of matter and laws of energy. And then when the deeper we went into matter, the less there was matter and the more there was energy. So much so that at the frontier of quantum physics, of studying matter at its minutest, most particle form, we actually call the last particle that we know of as the God particle, the Higgs boson. So here's how it gets very interesting, that the more we went up the curve of evolution, it became what we didn't understand, became a spirituality conversation. And the further we went deeper into particle and matter and the smallest granular the detail that Earth was made up of, beyond that also became a spirituality conversation, a God conversation, right? And to me, the difference, therefore, between science and spirituality is that whatever we keep understanding becomes science, what we don't understand becomes spirituality. And that's how the West and how we study it in our formal conversations. The way I study this, or the way we look at it at ACOM, the way we look at our ancient scriptures and texts, is actually to say that, somewhere we've cracked the code. So everything that science is struggling with today, explaining the human mind, the process of thinking, the concept of intuition, or at the other end, matter, how matter comes together, quantum entanglement, quantum transitions, all of it is science. And beyond that is a conversation that we already have answers to, which is our spiritual texts. So I believe, honestly, that at some point of time, science as we know it will evolve enough to understand, translate spirituality, and therefore science and spirituality will not be, while spirituality is the theoretical physics aspect of it, science will eventually catch up and we will have one conversation around it. The reason that I mentioned this to you is because that's how religion evolved. That's how spirituality evolved. The concept, the idea of faith, what I see, I can make sense of. What I cannot make sense of, I have faith in. जैसे हमारे यहाँ कहा जाता है ना, there are these three pillars of existence: prarabdha, astha, or jigyasa. So prarabdha is that understanding that we are here. We can keep finding out how we are here, why we are here, how we came into existence. Those are questions for science. But the acceptance of the faith that this is what was meant to be. And then there is curiosity of the world, which is jigyasa. So there are some things I can create answers to, there's some things I can find answers to. And then there is astha, which is trust, faith, and surrender of knowing that what's happening is right. Swamiji also spoke about the concept of the process, right? To me, that's what the idea of karma is. The context of being able to say that while we may have the destination or the aim in mind, but stay in the here and the now. Trust the process. Trust the fact that if you have expended some energy, and by the way, that energy doesn't need to be only the energy of action, but the energy of thought, the energy of intention, the energy of action. If you've spent some energy somewhere, it will have its own process, its own follow through, its own consequence. And that to me is how religion came about. Our need to understand and make sense of the world or accept the world that we could not necessarily cognitively, rationally, logically make sense of, but needed to understand, explain, accept, and believe in, right? So, I truly believe that this need for either religion or spirituality also stemmed from the fact that in this entire universal range of experiences, as human beings, our range of sensory experience is only this much, right? The rest of the world we don't make sense of, which doesn't mean that the world doesn't exist. Remember, we can't see radio waves. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Even for the whole electromagnetic spectrum that we know of, it's only this much. So the rest of the world that we can't necessarily sense because of the limitations of our human sensory mind or the human sensory experience, the human manas, how we transact with the world. Because of our limited range, we needed to explain everything else. And therefore that explanation came to us in the form of faith, the need for faith, the need for astha, the need for religion. And I'm deliberately not using the word dharma here, which is what we come to next. So that's the first one in the context of saying why this need existed. Why did we need spirituality? Why did we need religion? From there, I move to that next question of saying, so what? And therefore, what's the great joy of the Sanatan Dharma? Again, Swamiji had spoken earlier about the whole idea of human evolution, right? Now think about it. And this was a very good question actually that one of my students had once asked me. They said, Madam, please explain to us that so by the way, the term Hinduism didn't even exist in our vocabulary. It's a term that came in. So I hope you all know that the origin of Hindu as a word is actually very Zoroastrian in nature. When they came upon India, and India was known as the land of the Sapta Sindhu, the land of 7 rivers. And because they didn't have the alphabet Sir, they didn't have the syllable Sir in their vocabulary, it became Hapta Hindu. From Hapta Hindu, it became Hindu. Right? So Hindu is a relatively new word, but what's not a new word is the Sanatan Dharma. And one of my students had once come and asked me, and I thought that was a very good question. She said, Eka, if we had such a strong vocabulary, we had such a strong language in the form of Sanskrit, we had its format, we had its syntax, we had the grammar, we had the manuscript, we had all of it, then why hadn't we written down our texts? And I thought that was a very good question. Why was the text, why were all our scriptures and our text transmitted orally? So Shruti and Smriti. And then when I went about finding the answer, I thought it was such a beautiful answer that I found. So think about it. Shruti is hearing, Smriti is remembering, memory. So you heard something, and Sanatan Dharma, literally translated, Sanatan is perpetuity, unto forever. Dharma is not necessarily religion. That's a very loose translation of the word dharma. You know, it's like how Maya is loosely translated as illusion, but it's not really just illusion, is it? And that's why language becomes important. In fact, Dr. Chaudhary spoke a lot about the context of language, right? Which is that we really need to be careful about the words we use. Sanatan Dharma, literally dharma, is that which I dharo, jo main dharta hu, what I uphold. It is my way of life. So literally translated, Sanatan Dharma was the forever or the perpetuity way of life. There's no word of religion in this, surprisingly, right? And then and that was a good question. I thought of saying that if we had a language, a grammar, a format, why were we still transmitting through Shruti and through Smriti? And why had we not written our texts much earlier? So we all know, right, that the Mahabharata, for instance, was narrated, not written, but narrated across 7 generations of Vedavasa, starting with Krishna Dvipayan, ending with Krishna Sampayan. The first version, and we've studied the Mahabharata enough with philologically and in the language context to know that the first Mahabharata was about 25,000 richas. And by the time we finished with it in the 7th generation, we were at about 125,000 plus richas, almost about 136,000. So this whole thing of how the narrative grew. And that then took me to the fact that the fact is we had Sanskrit. Why didn't we write down our texts? And here was the beautiful answer. The fact is that if you write down something, it becomes absolute. It's cast in stone or cast in text. It's like the tablet of Moses, right? It's been written down. Ab yahi satya hai. But when you don't write it in stone, but transmit it orally. So maine kuch suna, Shruti, I hear it in my context. Then I remember it, Smriti, in my context. Because I don't have a written or a cast in stone format. I am forced to remember it only in my context. And therefore, when I see something, drishti, I form my own darshan, my view of the world with the context of the Shruti, the Smriti, the Drishti, and therefore my darshan. And why that was so beautiful was because that made it forever contextual. The truth of Sanatana was not because it was the absolute truth cast in stone or written in text, but the truth of Sanatana and what made it Sanatana was the idea that it was forever contextual. So if my mother says something to me, I'm listening to my mother, but I'm processing it. The viveka in me is processing it. The chitta, the viveka, the buddhi, the manas, the ahankara, all of that is processing it in my context, deeply relevant to me. And then I remember it. And by the way, neuroscientists across the world will tell you that memory is in building blocks of visual cues. So we have to create some kind of a visual meme or a trope around it to be able to remember it. So we remembered it, Smriti, in my context. My mother was saying in her context. And then when I saw something that linked to it, Drishti, I created my own view of the world. And that's how I made it forever contextual. It was the same value belief system, but it was forever contextual. So when we hear about Sanatan Dharma, it's not something that's regressive, that's ancient, that's cast in the past. But what made it Sanatan Dharma was the fact that it was forever perpetual, forever contextual, forever relevant, and therefore the philosophy unto perpetuity. To me, that is the crux of, and when we end this, before I end this, in my part of the speech, I would want you to remember this, both the aspect of how religion and spirituality exist so that we can have faith, we can have that way, prarabdha, astha, jigyasa, and learn to surrender and trust the process. That's first. The second one is about how it's important that we always listen, process, and act in our own context and have our own concept of the dharma we want to propagate or believe in or even accept or practice, right? And in fact, I'm going to use a very small example. I think Dr. Chaudhary also referred to it, and Swamiji also referred to it. The whole idea of evolution, right? So the fact is, when Charles Darwin came upon the scene of life 200 years ago and spoke about the theory of natural selection and evolution and survival of the fittest, we were like, just from Bengali mein bolte na, Akash theke pode gele. Oh my God, that's how humans came into existence. But the fact is that we've had Dashavatar for the last 5,000 years at the very least, if not before that, right? And the Dashavatar is exactly that. You start with Matsya, the fish, you move to the amphibian Kumra, you move to the land animal Varaha, you move to half man, half mammal Narasimha, you move to, in fact, the original Homo species before sapiens, the Homo erectus, the pygmy man, the Vamana. From Vamana, you move to the primitive Homo sapien Parashurama, to the physically fit Rama, to the intellectual Krishna, to the spiritual Buddha, till you reach that stage of Kalki, stop, pause, repeat, light of absolute clarity and consciousness, and then the whole cycle takes over again. Honestly, to me, that was a much better explanation of evolution than what Darwin brought in. And we've had it forever. We've just lost it, like I said, in the translation and the vocabulary. We've been so busy with the stories, the symbols, the rituals, that we've forgotten to evaluate the value belief systems behind it. And that is what I'd like you to remember, that the universality of religion or faith or belief does not come from what you're reading. It comes from how and what you're processing. All our value belief systems, our mythology manifests itself in stories, in symbols, in rituals. So if you ever want to understand either a person or a family or a civilization or a tribe or a community or any kind of peoples, see the stories they listen to when they preach. Talk, look at, study the rituals that they celebrate and they practice. Study the symbols they worship. They will tell you far more about us as a people than a text or a scripture would, right? So that's my second one, about saying how and why is religion and spirituality much beyond the texts and the scriptures of what you read versus how you process it, how you practice it, how you question yourself into it, and why are you there in the first place? That's the second thing I wanted to talk about. The third one, therefore, comes to the answer of how it's evolved. And that's where I want to bring in the whole idea of universality, about how religions have evolved. So we spoke about Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma has been there forever. And it really has been there forever. We have 5,000 years of documented scripture, since we as human beings understand texts and scriptures. But there's at least 12,000, 15,000, 30,000, and time is actually irrelevant in this. But the faith, the idea of the Sanatan Dharma, the idea of the forever relevant way of life has existed long before. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Religion or people evolve, or spirituality evolves according to the times we live in. What's the primary question of the times? And by the way, our popular culture, our texts, all represent the space of thought we are operating from. I mean, so if you remember, and I'm going to take a very short span of the last 40, 50 years, the era of the 90s, 70s was the era of the angry young man. All the movies that were produced in India were all about fighting corruption, fighting the system. And, Amitabh Bachchan became our biggest hero there was. That's because the popular culture represented and reflected the times of angst that India as a country was going through. It was, for a country that was formed in 1947, country, the land, the democracy, the framework. I'm not talking about our faith, our belief systems, and our civilizational existence, but just the formal structure of the democracy. In the 70s, it was going through its teenage years. And therefore, that angst is what was reflecting in our popular culture. It was just reflecting the popular sentiment, right? Similarly, the fact is that the religions and the texts in the religions have also therefore reflected the popular sentiment. Let's go through that, right? So when communities and civilizations and societal structures were just forming, the emphasis was on the karma. The emphasis was on doing. The emphasis was on coming together to figure out, how do we structure the society? What are the things we need to follow? What are the things we need to do? And by the way, that's what's reflected in the Vedas as a text. So the Vedas are our original texts. They came first. And the Vedas are basically SOP manuals. Largely, they tell you what to do, how to do, what's the process to be followed, etc. That's because they reflect the yuga that they were written at the end of, which was the Karma Yuga. The question being asked was, what do we need to do? And therefore, the popular sentiment was karma, and the output was the Vedas. After we learned to do, came the yuga after that, where we started questioning, where we moved from the physical to the intellectual, where we started asking, why were we doing something? What's the underlying philosophy? The jigyasa took over. We needed to understand why we were doing some things that we were doing. And therefore, the output, the scriptural output of that yuga, by the way, was the Upanishads, was the Aranyakas, was the Vedanta, was the commentary on the Vedas, because it was what we call the Jnana Yuga, the Yuga of seeking answers, of figuring the philosophy underlying it. And then somewhere around 2000, 100 plus minus 300 years ago, at the start of this current, of 2 millennia ago, was when organized religion happened. And here's where there's a very interesting transition, right? So if you look at it, all your organized religion, whether it is the Jaina, the Buddha, the Christianity, Islam, all of these religions, including, by the way, organized Hindu, the word Hinduism, the word the Hindu religion, the transition from the Sanatan Dharma to Hinduism is also around the same time, which basically tells you that somewhere about 2,500, 600 to about 1,500 years ago was the quest and the need that humans felt to organize themselves around tribes, communities, the transition from me versus you to us versus them, which is why all your organized religions have originated in that 600,000-year odd span. The quest at that time was to ritualize, was to institutionalize, was to organize ourselves into faith blocks. Whether that faith block was Islam, whether it was Christianity, whether it was Buddha, whether it was Jaina, or whether indeed it was Hinduism. And therefore, the texts for that period are stories, are prescriptive texts, for the lack of a better word, are the itihasa that got created, right? Which is why your Sanatan Dharma, and which is, I'm saying, the questions that were being asked were questions of belief, of surrender, of figuring why I should belong to one religion or one faith versus the other. And therefore, the texts that emerged as an output then were the Puranas, were the Itihasas, was the Quran, was the Bible, was the Bauddhic texts, was the Jaina texts. Because the need then for us was the need for bhakti, the need for belief, the need for faith. And at that point of time, it was a question of how we then organized ourselves, right? The reason I mention this to you is because, again, today, that's how religions have evolved. So there was the Sanatan Dharma, which was not a religion at all, which is pure philosophy. It's a way of life. Interestingly, by the way, the Sanatana, and you know why I am a Sanatana believer, is not because I was born to it. That's a very good reason, because it's my prarabdha is a very good reason. But even as the thinking human being, to me, I love the freedom it offers. It's not prescriptive. And the fact that it allows me to have my own darshan, and it accepts all my darshan. It turns around and tells me, Sanatana allows me the freedom of saying, Kiya, you like to understand the world into dual energy, matter, very scientific frameworks. तुम सांख्य में believe कर लो. तुम्हें लगता है कि नहीं, all of the world is just one. There is oneness between me and the universe. Very good. You believe in the Advaita principle. तुम्हें लगता है कि तुम बहुत chemistry or matter oriented हो, or you want to study the world very scientifically, you can belong to the Mimamsa. If you are about principles of natural justice, you believe in the Nyaya. And that's why I love it, because it allows you the freedom to be, take your own pick. तुम्हें लगता है कि larger philosophy का कोई context ही नहीं है, and the world is in the here and the now, and only what you experience is the truth. You be a Charvaka. You want to submit to the concept of just higher energy and power. You can belong to the Shakta. You can be a Shaiva Shakta. It doesn't matter, right? That's the freedom of the Sanatana, because it evolved in a time where we were not prescriptive. It wasn't an organized religion according to its rituals, its symbols, its stories, but it was organized according to you taking responsibility of your individual self, your belief systems, and for the society around you, right? Which is why that brings me to the last segment of this conversation, of saying what's the next yuga, and why is this conversation, the conversation at Shoolini, the conversation that Dr. Khosla is now talking about at the Yogananda Center, and Swamiji earlier has spoken about Yogananda ji, about Ramakrishna ji, Dr. Atre spoke about Sri Aurobindo and Ramakrishna ji, and Yogananda Paramahansa ji. By the way, my parents are huge Yogananda believers as well, so. And I believe in this faith completely. So why is this coming into conversation right now? And that's where I want you to specifically pay attention and take responsibility for it. The yuga after we've moved through karma and the output Veda, of jnana and the output of Upanishads and the commentary texts, of Bhakti and the Upanishads and the Purana and the Itihasic texts, the yuga that's emerging, that we are at a transition of, is actually the Nyaya Yuga. The Nyaya Yuga is the yuga of individual human justice, rights, and beliefs. We are at the stage where the popular and the more dominant sentiment is that of questioning why the system is the way it is. Why do I need to follow it? Why do I need to preach it? What does it offer to me? And the rest of questions that have become deeply personal to us. We've been through wars, we've been through famines, we've been through droughts. We are currently in the middle of, a lot of people actually call this the first step of pralaya. And by the way, that's not just in Indian texts. So even in the biblical texts of the four horsemen, this is what they call the plague, right? So there is a common thought and philosophy that exists across all organized religions, across all philosophies. And somewhere the original philosophy has been lost under the dust of stories, symbols, rituals, practices, and the popular narrative. now, as we step more and more into the Nyaya Yuga, the responsibility will be more personal. We will become our own agencies of our own thought and philosophy. Today, and for those of you, there are young students in this room. I am mother to you, two young children. I work with, not even young actually, they are 20 and 17, very difficult age to deal with, lots of questions to deal with. But that is reflective of the sentiment going forward. And therefore, it will become even more important for you to ask your own selves why religion and spirituality is important. What does it do for me? What does it mean for me? How does it ground me? How do I make sense of the world? And third, how do I need to practice it? One of you had asked this fabulous question of saying, you had asked Swamiji about how do you practice meditation? How do you make it come alive? These are the questions of the times. It doesn't matter for once in a lifetime of human evolution, you're at this privileged space where it doesn't matter what your faith is, what your religion is, what your context is. But for the first time ever, you have the luxury of your own choice, of asking the right questions, of doing what is right by you, grounds you, provides you with faith, and centers you into your community existence. And you do this, like I said, across three contexts. What does it do for me? How does it influence the mind? And why does mankind need it? To me, that is the crux of a religion. B, the universality of faith, irrespective of what religion you follow. And C, taking personal accountability of the questions you're asking. Be very careful. Treat yourself with the respect that you must of asking the right questions, of hunting for the right answers and finding your own path, faith, and belief. And with that, I want to now hand over back to Dr. Prerna and to anybody else who wants to open up for questions now. Or you might want to wait till you hear Dr. Santoki talking, because she'll be talking about the Vedanta philosophy. So you can ask your questions now or later. And thank you again for having me over. And I just urge you to practice, be in a state of perpetual curiosity, be in a state of perpetually seeking, be in that state of constantly believing in yourself and believing in the principle of Aham Brahmasmi. With that, I hand back over to you, Dr. Prerna.
Thank you so very much, ma'am, for explaining us and providing us the information in very depth. There are so many questions rather, but we are running short of time, ma'am. We'll definitely pass your email address to our students and the audience, and definitely we will take your questions. They can ask you through mail. So thank you again from the on the behalf of YCT and Shoolini University. Thank you so very much. Ma'am, we are very delighted that Chancellor sir has one question from you. So,
ma'am, you said that Hinduism came, a shift from Sapta Sindhu. It was not the actual religion. It came much later. My question is, you also informed us, we also know that also we are very diversified. Somebody worships stones, to snake, to temples, to self, to and finally to the universal God. There is so much diversity and there is so much permission. But still, what is that common factor which is binding all the Hindus?
Namaste, Dr. Khosla, and it is such a privilege to be talking to you. So here's my thought, and I think I have always felt, and I'm going to use the example which is a very, very contemporary modern technology. Right? I believe that even in terms of human evolution, जैसे हमने computers बनाए थे या जब हम technology में कुछ करते हैं, तो we are truly representative of our human selves, right? So I believe that पहले जब हम evolve कर रहे थे, जब हम technology evolve कर रहे थे, तो हमारे बड़े analogous computers होते थे कि भाई तुम्हारे पास क्या data आया और data से तुमने क्या information बना ली, right? Then we moved to the current world of AI, which is basically, so artificial intelligence in computing is nothing else but basically saying that they are plugged into a much larger, universal consciousness. So iterative learning and plugging into a larger concept of intuition and consciousness, which by the way is exactly what we do, what we've understood already in our texts as the process of antahkarna. कि मैंने क्या प्रोसेस किया वो मेरा मनस हुआ, उससे मैंने in my subconscious mind through the processes of चित्त विवेक बुद्धि अहंकार हमने उसको प्रोसेस करके इंफॉर्मेशन बनाया, and eventually we move into Ritambara. Ritambara is basically that meditative state where you plug into the larger consciousness. And then came that third level, and I'm using this as a specific example, where today we are very enamored with that concept of blockchain. So blockchain kya hai? Blockchain is basically distributed ledger. So blockchain basically means koi central spine nahi hai. Har transaction, somewhere in the past, it was conducted, it was approved, it was recorded and locked. So you don't have a central chain of command that you can snap into and something will collapse. That's what blockchain is. I often like to believe, Dr. Khosla, that हमारी जो Hindu philosophy है, Sanatan Dharma की philosophy है, that's actually like blockchain. It's a distributed ledger. There is no central spine to the system, which makes it completely personal, completely individual, and allows me to practice my own darshana. The only requirement that is of the religion, and I don't really like the word religion, but that's of the religion, of the faith, of the dharma, the way I uphold the system, is the requirement to take responsibility of yourself. Like I said, to me, there are just two Mahavakyas that sum up Sanatan Dharma completely. One, that is Tata Tvama Asi, that which you are, and I bow down to the divinity within you. But more importantly, Aham Brahmasmi. I am responsible for my own thoughts, intent, actions, and their consequences. So I, Dr. Khosla, firmly believe that the only thing that unites us all as practitioners of the Sanatan Dharma, and I will not use the word Hinduism, but practitioners of the Sanatan Dharma, is the need to take responsibility for our own karma, our own thoughts, our own actions, and their own consequences. So if that helps.
You have said, Aham Brahmasmi. Doctor, I know karma.
Thank you, Dr. Khosla.
Thank you so very much, ma'am. Thanks for joining. Thank you so very much. We have next speaker for the session, Dr. Janki Santoke. Ma'am is from Vedanta Wisdom Trust, and ma'am has spent more than 3 decades disseminating the knowledge of Vedanta to the general public, helping enhancing their quality of their lives. So ma'am will be talking about today, Vedanta is a philosophy as the base of all religions. So thank you so very much, Janki ma'am, for joining us. We have already seen you many times in our YCT webinars. Loving to see you and hear you. Not taking the more time, may I request you now to kindly start the talk. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Prerna. Our topic, our general topic is the universality of religion. And we have 20 minutes to cover this particular subject that we have taken, which is Vedanta, the unity of religion. Now, let's understand firstly what is Vedanta. Vedanta is a philosophy, and it shows us how all religions are essentially the same. In terms of the derivation of the name, it comes from Veda Anta. We know the 4 Vedas. The Upanishads come at the end of the Vedas, and therefore they are known as Veda Anta, Vedanta. These are the philosophical teachings of the Vedas. So what does it do? It gives us an understanding of life and of the ultimate reality through the use of reason. In Vedanta, what is the important thing is the use of reason. The buddhi is what is highlighted. So we understand life. We try to assess what is the ultimate reality, and we do it through the use of reason. Now let us see what happens in religion. What is religion? Religions usually understood to be the isms, you know, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Mohammedism. We have all these isms which we consider religion. What is the etymology of this word? Where does religion come from? Religion comes from two Latin words, re and ligare. Ligare means to join back, to join, and re means again, as in repeat, revert, you know, the re prefix means again. So what is religion? Religion is an attempt to join back. Join back means what? That means we have separated from something and we have to join back to it. Even the Sanskrit word yoga comes from the root yuj. Yuj also means to join. So what is religion? Religion is any attempt to join back to that which we have separated from. Now, every religion, all the isms that are, attempt this. Same thing that Vedanta does. But every religion has got three parts, three facets. The first facet of every religion is the philosophy. The second facet of the religion is its mythology. And the third facet are the rituals. Now, the philosophy is the same in every religion. Why? Because it speaks of the truth, and the truth has to be one. You cannot have many truths. There's one truth. So, the philosophy in every religion is the same. But the trouble is that philosophy cannot be understood by everybody. So each religion used a process or a method of explaining those sublime ideas in terms of mythology, in terms of ritual. And all these mythology and rituals, which are obviously different in every religion, do is explain the same philosophy. So what we are going to do today is understand how this works. We don't have a lot of time to do it, so I'm going to take just a few examples, because this is basically what this talk is about. That philosophy in every religion is the same, because philosophy is the search of truth, and truth is the same. So it's the same. But the explanation of that truth, its mythology, its ritual, these are different in different religions, but all that they try to do is explain the same basic philosophical truth. So just let's take a few examples for us today. Firstly, we'll understand the basic tenets of philosophy, just a few of them. First tenet, there is a reality. There is something real. There is a reality. It is referred to in different religions by different names. That ultimate truth, what is it? Islam calls it Allah. Christianity calls it the Father in heaven. The various sects of Hinduism call it different things. Narayana. In Vedanta, we call it Brahman. Different ways of expressing that one idea. There is an ultimate truth. That's the truth. The Zoroastrians refer to it as Ahura Mazda. Different names, all giving us the same concept that there is an ultimate truth. La ilaha illallah. There is only one God, and He is Allah. Exactly what every single other one says. There is only one God. One God means only one truth, one transcendental reality. And that is that one thing. Then have different names for it, but we all agree there is one, and He is the ultimate. Then secondly, that reality is your own self. It is the truth. You are that same divine principle, which is everywhere, inherent in you as well. Same thing. So God is supposed to have told Moses on the mount. Moses was given the commandments, and then Moses said, "Who shall I say has told me this?" So the voice of God is supposed to have said, it's a fantastic statement, "I am that I am. I am that I am." Voice of God says, "I am that I am." That I am in each one of us. We use it all the time. I am this, I am that, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm a child. I'm tall, I'm short. I'm happy, I'm unhappy. I'm intelligent, I'm dumb. So many things we add to the I am. But the pure I am, without any of these appendages, no man, no woman, no child. No good looking, bad looking, happy, unhappy, intelligent, dumb, all that you remove, all these attributes remove, and what remains is I am. I am that I am, God told Moses on the mount. When Muslims were going to Mecca, Muhammad is supposed to have said to them, "That which you seek is closer to you than the neck of your own camel. Go here and there and everywhere. Find out what is that I am." What Ramana Maharishi said, "Nan yar." Who are you? Just find out. You will know the ultimate reality. The Christians say the kingdom of heaven is within you. So what are we doing here? A human's mission is to find that truth. Muhammad said, "Don't worship anything other than that." To worship means to pursue. Everybody tells us, don't pursue anything other than that. Why not? Because it's the only reality. What are you pursuing a fake thing for? If it is not real, if it is not permanent, and you pursue it, then know for certain an impermanent thing is an impermanent thing. It goes away. That's what it means. So if you look at the world, everything is impermanent. Everything we possess is impermanent. Our own bodies are impermanent. Whatever emotions we go through, impermanent. Whatever thinking we go through, impermanent. All impermanent. And we pursue it. Ramatirtha says, "For a cap and bells our lives we pay. For a cap and bells our lives we pay. Bubbles we earn with a whole soul's yearning." Whole soul's yearning. How much we long for those things. Impermanent. How much it pains us when those impermanent things show us their impermanence. So every great master told us, a human being's mission is to find it. Muhammad said, don't worship anything else. The Upanishad said, desist from any other talk. Don't do anything else. Is that supposed to mean that we don't live our normal lives? Obviously not. How can you not? But you must know at the back of your mind what your purpose, what your mission is. You get married, you go to school, you go to college, for what? You get married, you earn money, you earn reputation, for what? At the end of the day, you must know that one permanent thing which your mind should be focused on. But the problem with this thing, whatever that ultimate reality is we don't understand it. How can we pursue something we don't understand? It can't be done, right? So all these religions gave us a symbol. They said, pursue this. You can't conceive what is that transcendental reality. So every religion gives us some symbol. It could be the Kaaba. It could be the cross. It could be the fire rituals. Different symbols. Just like the wedding ring symbolizes the wedding. So too, the various symbols of religion symbolize that ultimate truth. The symbol Om symbolizes that ultimate truth. The name Allah symbolizes that ultimate truth. This is a sound that symbolizes it. We could have objects that symbolize it. A murti, a cross, a crescent, different symbols, all to remind us of that divine goal that we have to reach, that we have to pursue through our life. But you may ask, and rightly so, like Dr. Banerjee said, this is the age of reason, and we must ask, why should we pursue that? Why is it our mission to find that? For that, you have to go to a basic thought. What are you doing in life anyway? What are you trying to do? You went to school, why? You went to college, why? You want a good income, why? You want a good spouse, why? What are you seeking? What do you really want? What's at the bottom of this pursuit? Some seem to get some search a marital partner. Some want to divorce their marital partner. Whether you want marriage or you want divorce, there is one thing that you're looking for. Whether you want to help people and benefit them, or you want to be a negative person and take everything from everybody. What are you seeking? The world's worst man doing the world's worst thing. What is he seeking? The world's best man, the most noble man or woman doing the world's best thing. What is this pursuit for? At the bottom of the pursuit is only one thing: the pursuit of happiness. That's it. That's all we're looking for. And how does this happiness actually come about? It comes about through desirelessness. When you don't have a desire, you are happy. When you have a desire, you are unhappy. Isn't that true? All mental agitations are created by unfulfilled desires. You have a desire, you're unhappy. You want to come first in class, you're unhappy. Simple, right? You want to get the job, you're agitated. You want to get that particular deal, agitated. When are you not agitated? Right now, if you're not agitated, think of what's happening. There's no desire playing in the mind. But suppose your mind has gone, oh my God, these speakers talked so much. When will we get our lunch? Immediately, there is agitation. All agitation is because of desire. Absence of desire is happiness. So, to know happiness is the absence of desire. And that is what is finding the transcendental reality. A human minus desire is equal to God. It's that simple. That is why they are all the time against it. Against it, not because you have to restrict yourself and not get married and not get your degree and not get money. Of course not. You have to do all these things. When India lived by these ideals, it was the most prosperous country. It had the best relationships. Just think in our country, we have the only known example of two brothers fighting. You take the kingdom. Everywhere else they're fighting, I'll take the kingdom. The only known story. Imagine, just think about it for a second. If you are willing to give your kingdom to somebody else, what degree of happiness do you have in your heart already that you're willing to give it away? What is that thing that you know that you can give such a kingdom away? Think about it. Imagine if you can be a ruler without having any desire for the kingdom. If you can be a student without any desire for marks, if you can be an employee without any desire for reward or gain, that means you're already happy. You don't want those things to gain happiness. You're already happy. You do them as a sport, as a leela, as having fun. This is called objectivity. So when we live a life impelled by desires, we go away from our self. And then we get agitated. And then to solve this agitation, we go further away. Now, what happened is in India, they knew this is what we will do. So they came up with a brilliant idea. What they did is they said, look, you guys, your mind goes to this, that, and the other. It goes to wealth, it goes to knowledge, it goes to so many things. So what they did is, in India, they came up with this bright idea. They divinized everything. They said, if your mind goes to wealth, then you're worshipping Lakshmi. If your mind is going to knowledge, Saraswati. If it's going to strength, Hanuman. And thereby they managed to divinize everything. So in India, you cannot escape the thought of God. Every street corner, there is something for you to worship. Or everywhere there's something, because it's constantly reminding you. Constantly. These desires, on the other hand, create for us a world. And that world that we live in becomes incredibly difficult because it's filled with desires. And these desires come from an inherent nature known as vasanas. We are in the state of vasanas when we are in deep sleep. And the Bible therefore says, God created the world out of nothing. Nothingness of vasanas. From that come our desires, and our desires create our world. You have desires for study, so you are in a university. You will have desire for work, so you go to a workplace. What we do, where we go, what we think, all determined by those desires, which are coming from our inherent nature, known as our vasanas. So when we burn these vasanas, what remains is the self. This is shown in every religion. In Hinduism, we burn camphor in the temple, because the camphor, when you burn it, it lets out black smoke. And in that light, you see the divinity. What happens in the church? You put on a candle. The candle, the wax, the camphor represents those vasanas, those desires. They burn with the light. And then what remains is the divinity. The candle, the fuel that holds that candle, melts away, goes away. And what remains is the church, the divinity. Same thing in the temple. The camphor burns away. And in that you get darshan of the Lord. So these are various ways of explaining the same basic idea. And these are the kind of, once you understand the picture, the philosophical picture, you understand immediately what every religion, what every ritual, what every mythology is trying to tell us. You can't help but appreciate the beauty of expression, whether it is in the Gita, like it says in the Gita, in fact, that Bahuda Gitam, where Rishis will speak of this in many ways, sing of it in many ways. Even Christ says that in the Bible. Many people will come and speak of this in different tongues, in different ways, express that same grand truth that we all are. So the study of Vedanta shows us how everybody is saying exactly the same thing. There is no difference. Universality of religion, it is the same. What's the difference? The point, the purpose, the philosophy is exactly the same. So that's it on Vedanta, the base or foundation of religion. I hope I have been able to give you some glimpse into it.
Yes, thank you so very much, ma'am. It is always being very honored that with your glowing face and smile, we always have a wonderful talk with you. Thank you so very much, ma'am. So have a huge round of applause. Thanks for joining, ma'am. We will be waiting for you in our next year for upcoming webinars. Thank you so very much. So thanks, everyone, the audience.